Welcome to the big show, everyone. I am Trish Regan. It's Trish Regan Show, and I'm telling you, Donald Trump is walking into a trap. We are days away from the biggest debate we've probably seen in certainly, well, I don't know, maybe you can go back to JFK Nixon, right? Back when TV was first coming out. This is going to be a big, big deal debate. And I got to tell you this, it's not going to be a favorable atmosphere to the former president. I mean, any which way you slice it, CNN is not exactly what we would call a hospitable environment for Donald Trump. And yet he's taking this on anyway. I mean, it shows a certain degree of confidence, but I have a warning for him. We're going to talk about that coming up. Reminder, if you have not already, do me this favor, go over to my new company, 76 Research, that I started with a dear friend, longtime friend, now colleague, Rob Horton. And it's for you, basically. I've wanted to do this a really, really, really long time. And I'm so proud of teaming up with Rob to help you guys make the right decisions about your investments and your future. About 10 to 15 stocks in each one of our portfolios. You can also subscribe to the 76 report. New one out today. Speaking of which, listen, it is the best $9.95 I think you're ever going to spend. So go check that out. We'll talk a little bit more about it later in the program. But I wanted to at least remind you of that as we look at Donald Trump closing in on what could be a really difficult evening for him. So I don't think it's any secret that Jake Tapper and Dana Bash are not journalists, right? Like I get a little tired of this. I mean, what is a journalist really, right? You are supposed to report the facts. You're not supposed to have a viewpoint. Well, that's changed nowadays. Everybody kind of sort of does have. I don't believe that you can ever be completely down the center anyway. I mean, you're a reporter, right? You've got to have some kind of sense of self that one would think would sort of kind of come out. One would hope. I mean, that's the challenge, I think, that, they're all around there masquerading like they are journalists with a capital J and that they don't have an opinion on anything. Well, let me tell you, they should have an opinion, and it's kind of annoying when they don't actually come forward and admit their opinion. I mean, Jake Tapper spent the last 7.5 years, well, let's call it 7, because I think he was hoping and angling for this Trump interview, debate, which they did manage to secure at CNN, but he was hoping and praying he would get this thing. And so maybe in the last 3 months, right, he's tried to sound more neutral. I mean, he's not, but he's trying to sound that way. But it's been very clear over the years exactly where he stands. Same with Dana. So why go and do a debate at CNN? I don't really get it. I mean, I think Fox would have been out for blood, so to speak, right? They're so working hard to prove that they are not in Trump's camp, even though, he's the only Republican. So if it's a conservative network, one would think, but don't be too sure, right? Don't be too sure. Not when you've got Paul Ryan on the board, and Paul Ryan even said he's not going to vote for him. Trump didn't take too kindly to that. It's like fisticuffs there. There are full-on blown out war between Trump and Fox News right now. We'll see if they're able to mend fences as he has to deal with CNN. But I have some concerns about him going into this. I don't think the rules as we see them are necessarily going to benefit him. I mean, they could in that. My advice to him really and truly would be, you know what, you're outstanding at this sort of off the cuff stuff. But the reality is, if you talk over a guy that seems as feeble and fragile as this particular president is, then I think that you're going to run into certain complications, right? It's like when he was debating Hillary Clinton. He did really, really well at that, I got to say. He was funny. He, at times, had a lot of gravitas, and then at times had a lot of sort of empathy. I mean, there was that moment when he praised her as a mother and as a grandmother. So I think that he went into that thinking, okay, I'm dealing with a woman here. I'm up against a woman. And people told him, okay, you got to do better with women in general, so let's calm down. When he debated Joe Biden in 2020, it was like, this is a guy I'm up against. And so the gloves were off. And what I would just say is you might want to put on the gloves just a little bit so that you don't look mean, right? You don't want to look mean. And maybe to a certain extent, the microphone being closed at certain times will help him. But then again, remember who you're dealing with, okay? CNN. So knowing that it's CNN, knowing that they're out to get you, knowing that they do not want you to win under any circumstance. I mean, they had their guy on the air just the other day talking about how he thinks everybody's going to jail if Donald Trump wins. I mean, Jim Acosta was constantly battling Donald Trump, another CNN person. I don't believe that that would actually happen. I think that you run the risk of that more so, frankly, under Joe Biden. And we've seen reporters like Matt Taibbi be intimidated when it came time for him to have to testify in front of Congress about the Twittergate situation. Well, what happened? The IRS showed up on his doorstep that very same day. You had Obama's IRS going after Tea Party folks. You had Obama's team spying on two reporters I know, one formerly at CBS News, Cheryl Atkinson, one formerly at Fox News, James Rosen. So that didn't happen during Donald Trump, but it did happen during Obama. And we see the intimidation factor going on during President Biden, not to mention, let's be very clear, they're gaslighting us like there's no tomorrow. We're going to talk about that. No, it's not us, it's you. That keeps happening. And they're twisting facts. And great example, the 51X spooks that came out and said, nope, the laptop is totally fake, bought and paid for and sold to you courtesy of Rudy Giuliani and the Russians, except that was totally wrong, false information. They were the people trafficking and misinformation back then. So this is the reality and complexity, if you would, of the moment that we are in. And so I think you need to think about all those things. And I think that Donald Trump needs to think about what exactly is in it for CNN. Maybe 2 commercials, right? They get 2 commercials. They're going to play commercials. And usually people don't play commercials during a debate, but they're all about the moolah. They got to make a few. They got to make a few bucks. We're not going to hold that against them. See, they're capitalists, even though they think they're communists. Even though we call it the Communist News Network, they are still fundamentally capitalists at the end of the day. So they're going to try and make a buck. They're trying to get some attention. And part of that means, sticking it to Donald Trump. In other words, they want a nail in the coffin. Everybody's reporting on a recent poll. It was like one out of the economists that maybe they're neck and neck now. Typically what you had seen in all of the polls was that Donald Trump was ahead, and now you're seeing some indication that they're neck and neck. Well, this is going to be a really important debate. It's important, just like the State of the Union was really, really important. And everybody's kind of like, oh, gosh, what was going on with Biden? Because that was like a whole new Biden that we saw that night, and Donald Trump has made some allegations. But if Biden shows up like he was in the State of the Union, then Americans will be somewhat impressed by that. And maybe, all that cheap, fake stuff that KJP keeps talking about will settle in. I don't think so. I don't think he can hold it together for that long. I just don't. Unless there's a little extra something on the side going on, and I'm not talking just about coffee, I don't think he can actually keep his thoughts together that long. But maybe that's, again, when I say Trump is walking into the lion's den, that's part of it, because the structure of this debate is really going to be very heavily reliant on the hosts themselves. Now, I can tell you right now, look, I've moderated 2 debates, 2 Republican undercard debates when I was at Fox. So I know what goes into the questions ahead of time. I know the research involved. So I would suspect that there's really certain kinds of questions that are going to be directed at Trump that will not be directed at Biden. It just feels like that is the name of the game. And this is what they do. In the meantime, if it doesn't go well for Biden, they already have their out. Here you go. Cheap fake. Any unedited video of Joe Biden's cognitive decline that the Biden administration does not want you to see. This is a meme that's going around. It tells you what the new noun of the moment is: cheap fake, just exactly what it is. And look, I think that KJP is ready, willing, and able to basically tell you, you didn't see what you thought you saw at that debate if he has a bad performance, right? Here's KJP doubling down on the whole fake thing, trying to allege that all these videos that we see of Joe Biden in rather vulnerable states, one after another, they're not real. They're not real. It's not what you really think.
Yeah, and I think you all have called this the cheap fakes video, and that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith, and some of your news organization have been very clear, have stressed that these the right wing critics of the president have a credibility problem because of the fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation, disinformation, and so we see this, and this is something coming from your part of the world, calling them cheap fakes and misinformation. And I'll quote the Washington Post, where they wrote about this, and they said how Republicans use misleading videos to attack Biden in a 24-hour period.
There's plenty to attack Biden on. Let's just be honest, okay? Right? We'll see if CNN can actually come up with the right lines of questioning in order to help expose some of those things that he can be attacked on. But let me tell you, the Republicans are doing it every single day. You get the economy that they're attacking on. You get the inflation that they're attacking on. You get the border that they're attacking on. You've got international struggles that they are attacking on. And you've got the whole law and order and crime situation that they keep attacking on. So they don't even need to go to his age, KJP. That's just gravy, okay? That's literally gravy. Except for the fact the majority of Americans really strongly feel that Joe Biden is too old for the gig. 81 years old, and this is not a young 81. This is what you call a very feeble, very old 81. And the reason those videos are so concerning is because, and you guys have seen him, I've played him over and over again, he just doesn't seem as though he's in the right state. He's looking dazed and confused. It's like the lights are blinding and the reporter questions are intimidating and the crowd isn't, he can't dance. Okay, so what? He can't dance. But it's the fact that he's just looking off, staring into space, that I think is the real concern there. And she complains that they're falsely edited. Well, okay. So maybe he wasn't having quite as indiscreet a moment as we thought when he was over in France. Remember when he tried to go sit down? He's like sitting, tried uno, dos, tres. Fourth time, he finally sits. And so he kept going down. Well, the concern was that we never saw him sit. In fact, when you first saw the video, it looked like there wasn't even a chair there. So people concluded that he was having a very personal moment. And that was not the case. And they got it out right away. No. He was just trying to sit down and everybody eventually sat down. But it's the slowness with which he operates, right? He walks slow. It takes him forever to put on his sunglasses. He's looking dazed and confused all the time. So you compound that with, okay, maybe they cut the clip short. But if he was like Sarkozy up there, Macron up there, if he was like the Prime Minister of Italy up there, Meloni, if he was like anyone else on stage with him, his wife even, then nobody would actually come to those conclusions. Nobody would be so suspicious about his ability to do the job. But the fact that he looks so darn feeble, well, that's what plays into it. That's exactly what people are concerned about. And you know what? They should be concerned. The guy's running the free world, thank you very much. They should be concerned, but they don't want you to be concerned about that. They want you to be concerned and threatened by the idea of another Donald Trump term. New today, we have learned the Biden campaign is putting some $50 million into an ad campaign to really circulate this idea that Trump has bad character and he is a convict, like a convicted felon, I should say. Convicted felon. That's, in fact, what Alex Soros, son of George, recommended y'all call him. He actually said members of the media, et cetera, should only call him one thing going forward. Just refer to him as a convicted felon. Again, remember the deal here. So Trump is the convicted felon, according to the left, that they can attack. Biden is the like son of God, right? Like he's the be all end all, despite the fact that he is so weak and so frail and so bad on every policy front. You're not allowed to go there. And if you do, they're going to call you out as just sort of circulating in what they call cheap fakes. I don't like that because I don't like seeing the president on the ground like that. It actually does upset me. And you don't see me actually showing a lot of video of him falling on the plane or at the Air Force Academy graduation because I don't like seeing that. And I don't think it looks good on the world stage. And I think it makes us look weak. But I also don't like this idea that they're just going to go, it's good versus evil. Hey, we did this last time around, did we not? and we landed with Biden. So in 2020, all they did was say, it's really simple. You got the good guy and the bad guy. Well, people have had the so-called good guy, I say that in quotations, for nearly 4 years now. And they've realized that, you know what? It may not just all be about character and character only. It may be about something more than that. Might policy actually matter? I think it does. I think it does a lot. And so this debate in some ways is going to be pretty darn telling, because Biden, his favorite topics are abortion, which, by the way, the president would have nothing to do with anymore, right? Because it's a federally, it got kicked, forgive me, back to the state. So it's no longer part of the federal government's purview. So, you know, why are we talking about that? That's a state issue. You go deal with that in the states now. The Supreme Court kicked it back. And then his other issue that he wants to talk about, this cracks me up. Like, he must be delusional. Really, really delusional. He wants to talk about the economy. So I'm like, oh, buddy, like, game on, right? I do think that Donald Trump will be able to talk about the economy in a pretty meaningful, significant way that just pokes hole after hole after hole in anything that Joe Biden has to say. But all that said, remember, you're not allowed to think that. You're not allowed to think that Joe Biden is responsible for inflation. That's just cheap, fake kind of stuff, right? Cheap, fake kind of stuff. You have to go back to the well and just say, this is a guy who's a convicted felon. Well, there's one person over on MSNBC, well, a lot of people, I should say, over on MSNBC that buy this line, and by the way, have adopted this line already in their speech pattern. I want you to hear one of them right now. Bear with me.
Felon plays dirty. He plays ugly. He's done it many times.
Did you hear that? We got the convicted felon.
He plays ugly. This convicted felon.
There we go.
Plays dirty. He plays ugly. He's done it many times in the past. We could spend the next 3.5 hours listing his lies. We wouldn't get through them. He lies like a rug and gaslights people. And I actually think this could be a very fraught territory for President Biden, or any other candidate who wants to have an equal playing field and really debate the issues. And on top of that, this former president has a number of so-called news networks that will amplify and back up his conspiracies, his gaslighting, and his lies.
Oh my gosh. So you get it? You get what's going on here, right? I mean, it's actually kind of funny. So they're already out there setting the stage, if you would, for if he doesn't perform well. They want to make sure, right? They got to kind of set it up. He's up against a convicted felon. And whatever happens, it's going to be those right-wing news outlets and all those scattered shows that you watch. Reminder, subscribe. Make sure you do that. And like and share and make a comment. I read all the comments, by the way. It all helps, you guys. It all helps. And anyway, if you're watching this show, you're probably persona non grata. So I feel for you. And thank you. You're brave, coming over here to the streaming side of the business. Anyway, the news networks that will amplify, I guess she's referring to Fox and News Nation and, a few of the independents like myself and others that are out here. But the deal is, they're doing exactly what they are threatening or thinking that Donald Trump would do. They're like, oh, he's going to gaslight you. What do you think you guys are doing when you sit there and tell us, ladies and gentlemen, that he's not frail and that he didn't need to be escorted off the stage by President Obama? They're just good friends. It was just a nice moment. No, we have eyes, okay? When you sit there and tell us that you brought down inflation, that it was 9.4% when you came to office, Joe, I'm sorry, Joey. No. You know what? Inflation was like 1.4% when you came to office. And you drove it up through your third stimulus check by letting your buddy Chuck Schumer ram through a whole bunch more spending. And then, of course, Jerome Powell doesn't help because he just can't stop printing money over at the Federal Reserve. Yeah, that leads to problems, which is a reminder. Hey, if you're worried about inflation, do make sure that you go over to 76 Research. We have a whole inflation portfolio for you, inflation protection portfolio. We also have a an income generation portfolio, and we have a resilience kind of growth portfolio for you. So take a look at those model portfolios. Just go to 76research.com, click on model portfolio at the top there, and go take a look at them, or subscribe to the 76 Report at the very least. Go to 76research.com. Check us out on YouTube as well, because we have a new channel there at 76 Research. But this whole idea, they're just going to go after him with everything they got. I mean, I guess we should not be surprised by any of it now, should we? Right? No. I mean, we're all adults here. We know exactly what's going on. We know exactly what's going down. We know how these folks operate, and they're going to continue to do so. They own the media news space. If anybody else comes near, they're threatened by that. And don't kid yourself. It's not like it's just Trump. I mean, they did it with Nikki Haley, called her all kinds of things. They did it with Ron DeSantis. If they think that anybody's getting close, I mean, for goodness sakes, Byron Donald out of Florida, the congressman out of Naples, I mean, he's black. And he made some comment to the effect of, in the post-Civil War era, that there was a more united black family, and the real devastation for black Americans came in the 1960s with LBJ, right? And all of a sudden, you had a welfare program in place that kicked the men out of the house. He's not wrong when he says that. And yet they poured on him like you would not believe, insisting that, he's some kind of, Jim Crow sympathizer. I mean, that's pretty bad. You want to talk about cheap fakes. That's a cheap fake. But they're going to gaslight you all day long. They're going to tell you that you don't know what's what. I mean, you got Fauci here, who certainly was very talented at that. Don't forget, right? He made an appearance on The View this week. And first of all, it was sort of nauseating, totally nauseating, listening to Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, I don't think is going to be long for that job once Disney sells ABC, mark my words. Anyway, she just laid out the red carpet. She couldn't stop fawning over the guy. We're going to play that, but I also got to show you what he said, which I'm just like, do these people have amnesia? Watch Whoopi.
So before we start, people are so glad to see you. They are so glad to see you. So thank you for coming on the show and for everything you've done from the very beginning. It's extraordinary, and you're no worse for the wear. You look good.
Thank you.
You say empathy has always guided you as a physician and a public servant, but there's also a Latin phrase that has consistently come up for you, and I'd love you to share it and tell everybody what it means.
Well, when I was getting my education in high school, Latin and Greek was an important part of our classical training. It was actually at Regis High School, a few blocks from here. It was a Jesuit school. And one of the things that they mentioned to us when things got down and you felt that the world was caving in on you was illegitimate non carborundum, which means don't let the bastards wear you down.
Okay, all right. So Anthony Fauci making the rounds, and I just think that this is kind of interesting because it's like, sorry guys, you know what? There's tape. There's tape now. I specifically remember Anthony Fauci on CBS News telling John LaPook on 60 Minutes that, nope, you didn't need masks. You didn't need to wear a mask. This was early on because apparently they were hoarding all these masks. And yet, here's what he's saying these days as he pumps his book on The View with Joy Behar.
Democracy, it's very threatening, I think.
It's in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy, I think. Yeah. So you dedicate a chapter in the book to your dealings with Trump. It's called, the chapter's called "He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not," and you describe some angry, ranting, expletive-filled phone calls where he would berate you and flatter you in the same breath. I'm wondering, you just said you worked with 7 other presidents. Did any one of them ever speak to you the way he does, or did?
No, of course not. Not even close.
Wow.
You know what I meant by loves me not, early on in the beginning, he is an engaging character, and we had a certain rapport with each other. I was trying to figure out what it was. I think is that 2 guys from New York City. He was from Queens, I was from the Bronx, and we kind of had that, New York he calls it swagger with each other that was fine. And all that was really good in the beginning until, he wished and hoped that the outbreak would disappear because it clearly was getting in the way of both the economy and then, as a result of that, into the election cycle. Yeah. So he started to say things that actually were not true. And I just felt that I had a responsibility for my own personal and professional integrity, but also my responsibility to you, to the American public. So I had to contradict him. That was very difficult for me to do that. Once I did that, then things got really dicey because I don't think he went away from the fact that we did have a good relationship, but he was really very upset about the fact that I had to get up and say, no, it's not going to disappear like magic, and no, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work no matter what Laura Ingraham is telling you. I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah, well, she doesn't like it if you disagree with him. That's why a lot of his cohorts in the Republican Party are kowtowing to him, because they know it displeases him.
Right. Well, speaking about hydroxychloroquine, countless Americans lost loved ones to COVID. My husband lost both of his parents, two doctors, within 3 days of each other from the pandemic. Thank you. We remember those pandemic briefings. I remember the injection of bleach, perhaps, the hydroxychloroquine, dangerous recommendations. You were particularly disturbed, I read, by his refusal to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Now, what was this time like for you, having to contradict the President of the United States, and what should everyone know about how he handled the crisis? Because I blame him for my in-law's death.
Yeah. Well, the people who became very angry with me among his staff, people like Peter Navarro and Mark Meadows and others, thought that I was doing that because I had some sort of antipathy to the president, which I did not. And it was very painful for me. I have a great deal of respect for the presidency of the United States of America. I've served 7 presidents, so it wasn't like, wow, isn't this cool that I'm contradicting the president? It was very, very painful, but I had to do it. With regard to the masks, the thing that was the problem is that when the CDC came out and made the recommendations that when you're indoors, we should be wearing masks. That was at the time that the infections were going like that.
Right.
And when he got up and said, well, it's a recommendation, but I'm not going to do it, I choose not to do it, I considered that a missed opportunity to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to get people to do things that was for their own safety. He has...
here's what I will say about that. I don't entirely disagree with that idea in that, he could have had the MAGA masks and everything, and then it could have been sort of, to advertising his presidency, if you would. However, Anthony Fauci, who, by the way, has totally jumped the shark, trying to cash in at this moment, even though I think he was like one of the most highly paid people in the administration. He was the guy who told us over and over again in the initial stages of this that you didn't need the masks. I mean, the contradiction and the amnesia that goes on, it's really, really nauseating. He's on record saying that. I also spoke recently with a nurse in the New York City area who told me they were telling her staff in February, no, you shouldn't be wearing masks because we want you to be able to engage with your patients and they need to be able to see you, etc. I mean, that was just a bunch of cover, because what were they doing behind the scenes? They were hoarding masks because they were really, really concerned. So they weren't giving us the information, the correct information on time in any way. And what consequently happened is that people lost more and more faith in the government. And when you lose faith in those institutions, you know what? It's hard to get them back. It really is. And Joe Biden has single-handedly managed to erode all faith in our institutions. I mean, in his own little way, he keeps taking shots at the Supreme Court as well, because somehow he thinks he's going to grandfather everybody who went to college and still has debt that they haven't paid off, whether they graduated or not. Somehow it's going to be your problem. You're going to have to pay that stuff off. And the Supreme Court is wrong for actually saying, no, you know what? That's not something that you can do. It's really quite troubling. And I would say this. They keep making these comparisons about, how Trump is going to be a dictator. Wait a second. I kind of think that that's in the liberal camp, right? To be rather dictator like, I mean, just go down to Brazil if you would. Go look at the Workers' Party there in Brazil. Lula runs it nowadays. President Lula, a former union organizer who then became president of Brazil, presided over Brazil, wound up in jail. His vice president wound up in jail. I got a great Brazilian story. I actually sort of snuck into the Brazilian palace. Didn't technically, I was admitted by somebody who was the cabinet member in charge of technology for Brazil, because they wanted to do a big special on how Brazil was growing its technology. And I was there as a CNBC correspondent, and they invited me and they said, you can have an interview with Lula. And then the PR person found out and went bonkers. Anyway, I wound up having to be escorted out, but it was easy. It was kind of interesting how easy you could get in. And I actually attended a meeting with Lula and Dilma Rousseff, et cetera, and spoke a little bit with them off the record. So I got some sort of background there from them, but did not get the official interview, unfortunately. Anyway, I would say this. You know what is so critical in Brazil, and from my reporting that I have seen down there, people don't want to have a repeat of inflation. Like, you ask them about anything, they will take anything except for inflation, because they remember those horrible days when inflation was that bad, kind of like how we're going to feel after a while, right? And this is something that the central bank tries to guard against. This is partly what a central bank is always trying to do. And so they try to manage the amount of liquidity in any system, like they try and do and clearly fail at doing here in the US. They try and do the same thing in Brazil. So there's a guy named Roberto Campos Neto, and he is in charge of this down there in Brazil. You see his picture on the screen if you're watching here our YouTube channel in real time. Well, now Lula wants to gag him, doesn't want him talking, because he doesn't like what he's saying. And he says that basically he's at odds with what they're trying to do, because he's trying to actually keep inflation under control. So it just kind of reminds me in a similar way to what we're witnessing here. And I think it's important to think about, because they're trying to write their own narrative, you guys, that has nothing to do with reality. I mean, a great example of this came up just the other day on CBS's internet platform, where they invited Tom Perez on, big deal in the Democrat Party, who's now getting an advisor position in the White House. And they invited him on, and they explained exactly how the American public is thinking about immigration. I mean, this is a very, very important issue for so many Americans right now. Most Americans do not want illegal migrants in this country. Now, most Americans are pretty nice, but there comes a point when they're like, wait a second, you know what? I have to take care of myself and my family and my community. And it's not great if we don't know who's here, because we only have so many resources with our schools, our hospitals, etc. And if you're not a contributing member of society, you're not here legally, then we're going to have a problem with that. Joe Biden clearly, disagrees and has made it quite clear over the years, including as far back as 2016, 2020, in the debate, the Democrat debate, that he would welcome them all. He's like, stampede the border. Well, that's exactly what they did, right? They did stampede the border, and they're continuing to do so, to the point where he's now having to shut it down. Although he's got a new clever little thing where he's going to actually grandfather people who are spouses of Americans. So if you came here illegally, but you marry someone, you no longer have to go back to your country and reapply for citizenship, which is technically the way you do it right now and the way it's been done, because what do we want to do? We want to encourage good behavior, and we want you to come into the country under the right circumstances, which is why that rule exists. Anyway, he's getting rid of it because apparently, good behavior is no longer rewarded in any way, shape, or form. But this came up, and I found this fascinating, how Biden's advisor, Tom Perez, just refused to believe the polls. I mean, this is the CBS poll, and they're reading it to him, and he refuses to believe it. Think about that. Again, gaslighting you, because he's like, no, you're wrong. Here we go.
And yet, Tom, a lot of voters seem to think it's not the smart thing to do. CBS News polling recently found that 62% of Americans are in favor of a national program to deport all undocumented immigrants, all 11 million of them. So how much support do you think there would be for the White House plan that was announced today?
I'd love to sit down with your polling team and show them how they've gotten this wrong.
Woo! It's wrong. You see what I'm saying? I mean, they don't like it. They go back to, it's just a cheap fake. We can't can't really run a country that way. And I would just point out that this is kind of a really lousy thing to do. It's quite diabolical because you're trying to massage the facts, manipulate the facts into something that's preferable to you. Now, I get it's politics, right? And that happens all the time. It's happened for decades in politics. But now it's gotten so bad where they're like, no, that's not what you are seeing. You're looking at that all wrong. There's really no inflation, even though you're sitting there going, oh my God, groceries have gotten so expensive. Prices keep going up. I can't take a vacation this year. It's too expensive. Well, you're not wrong. It is too expensive. It's crazy expensive. And it's because of bad management. Really, really, really bad management from an administration that doesn't really seem to know what they're doing, whether it's Jennifer Granholm running the energy department who doesn't quite seem to understand how energy markets work, whether it's the social worker turned, he started as a music major, as the musician turned social worker turned economist. He doesn't have any degree in economics, Jared Bernstein. He doesn't even understand entirely how central banking works. That came up recently. He's your go-to guy on the economy, combined with Janet Yellen, who's been a career bureaucrat. This is not the brightest team. So you've got the blind leading the blind. And unless Obama's behind the scenes, which is one of the thoughts. Hey, you know what's coming up? 4th of July. And so, do you see that hat behind me? Right behind me right there? Yeah. This is my favorite hat. It's one of the hats that we sell at the trishregan.shop. Let me see if I can put that in here for you guys to see. It is called trishregan.shop, and I really do encourage you to go. You can help support the show there, and trishregan.shop. You can help support the show, and you can get some really, really, really great merch. So all my merch is right there at trishregan.shop. 4th of July is coming up. We want to make sure you have all your patriotic stuff, and why not a Live Free or Die mug to drink your coffee out of every single day. Also, a quick reminder for 76research.com. 76, this is for you guys. This is absolutely for you. It's for me, it's a labor of love. All of this is kind of a labor of love, I admit, but I'm having a heck of a good time doing it. So go check out 76research.com. Subscribe to that. It is well worth your time. It is very, very much worth your money. It's just $9.95 a month, and you are going to get so much. For an additional $23, by the way, you can get the model portfolio as well. So this is money well spent. You got to think about yourself. You got to think about your future. I can't say that enough. Start today, really and truly. Thank you so much for joining. We got much more coming up in the week ahead. I look forward to talking to you about all of it. I'll see you then. Have a good one.